Out. Yeah. I'm going to push that through in the right plane as yet. Do you want a t-shirt? Neil, do you want a t-shirt to go with it? Oh, well. Put them through the dry cleaner at the same time. I'm going to push that through in the right plane as yet. Do you want a t-shirt? Yeah. You can do that. I've lost my cursor. Okay, cool. Welcome everyone. Welcome to CocoaHeads for August. Pretty good turnout tonight. Thanks to everyone for coming. A little bit less rainy than last month, which is nice. So to begin with, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. A little bit of housekeeping to begin with. So, hey, I'm Zach. I help run CocoaHeads along with Christian up the back there. He's busy working away, not listening to me. That's all right. Anyway, give either of us a yell if you've got any questions. As always, a big thank you to our sponsor, Billu, without whom we couldn't run tonight. We're in their space, obviously, and they help with all of our running costs as well as providing the food for the night as well. So thank you to Billu. And a reminder that CocoaHeads has a code of conduct. It applies to all of our events, be that online, in person, if you're in the Slack community. And so it sort of boils down to 3 key points. And they are: be respectful, be inclusive, be aware. You can read the full policy on the website at the URL you can see there. But if you have any problems or questions or anything to report, please speak to myself or Christian tonight, or you can send us a message online if you prefer to talk to us that way. So speaking of the Slack community, we do have a Slack community. Everyone's welcome to join, and it's a good place for information about the events before they happen, and also just a way to stay in touch with fellow developers throughout the month. For example, there's a jobs channel, good way to find a new job if you're looking, or if you're looking to hire, you can post about it in there as well. Big welcome to our first time attendees. Hand up if you're attending for the first time tonight. Welcome. And also a shout out to some other CocoaHeads groups around Australia. So we've got the Melbourne CocoaHeads group. If you like what you see tonight, they do something similar on the second Thursday of the month. We're every third, but they have an excellent live stream as well. So it's definitely possible to join in even if you're not in Melbourne. And also Canberra CocoaHeads has started back up again recently. I'm not aware if they have a live stream, but it's definitely happening in person. And they have a website where you can check out more information. So in-person conferences are back. The next one that I'm aware of is NS Spain. It's happening in the middle of next month, though last time I looked, tickets were sold out and there's a wait list. So if you're interested, I hope you've purchased tickets already. So looking ahead to next month, our September meetup will be on the 15th of September. It's the third Thursday again, and it'll be here again. So below offices. Still looking for talks, so if anyone's interested, please just give me a yell. We can make that happen. So if you remember last month, we ran a bit of a charity auction, had some old Apple merch to give away in exchange for a small donation to charity. We got rid of a decent amount of stuff last month, considering the turnout, but we do have sort of what was left from there here this month. And so it's up the front here. So I'd encourage you after the talk to come up and have a look if you're interested. We've got a t-shirt, some pins, and just a binder. So if any of that appeals to you, it can be yours in exchange for a donation. So tonight's schedule, what's happening? Well, we're in the housekeeping now. We've got a month in review coming up, and then we have a talk. Oh, I'm sorry, I have made a mistake on that slide, but it is meant to be a talk by Amy on SwiftUI charts. I'm sorry, I copied in the wrong slide from last month. Sorry, Amy.
On charts.
No, navigation. Sorry, that was sorry. On a roll.
We know.
Yeah, it's here. It's been saved by the printouts. Sorry, man. Cool. So getting stuck into the month in review, what's been happening. The beta train for all the things has continued. Now hit the point in the beta cycle where sort of the iOS beta has gone ahead of the Xcode beta, and presumably that's because we won't get a new beta or Xcode beta until all the goodies are in there for new devices. But things are sort of starting to take shape and are looking pretty stable as of the latest releases. But I think the biggest beta news from a consumer perspective is that the battery percentage has made a comeback.
Go wild.
It's very controversial. It's very amusing to read all the hot takes online last week when it came back. I think you either firmly sit in the camp of it belongs or it shouldn't be there at all. But yeah, that's been happening, and that's probably the biggest bit of beta news. In more sort of Apple developer news, Apple's been running sessions with App Store experts, live presentations and Q&A sessions, and it's still happening through till the end of the month. So if you're interested, you can still register for these on the developer site. Also in beta news, as of, I think it was beta 4, the Live Activities API is now available. So that was introduced at WWDC and sort of allow you to have widgets on your lock screen which update in real time. They seem pretty cool, and some of the concepts that Apple demonstrated at WWDC seem like a good use for it. So it'll be interesting to see which apps take advantage of that during the when it launches publicly, which we have been told won't be with the initial release of iOS 16, but instead probably more likely in a 16.1 based on what they're saying. And I did also want to call out that if you haven't read the documentation on it, it's actually fantastic documentation. Like, they've got this great web page on the developer site that basically covers start to finish building one of these live activities. And sort of, I haven't tried to build one, but after reading this, it felt like I had almost everything I needed to get started, which credit to the documentation team is pretty good, given how obscure some of the documentation can be. So a little bit of hardware news. A report says the AirPods will switch over to USB-C charging as early as next year, but that's not expected for the AirPods coming later this year. In Apple ad news, there's also a report that is suggesting Apple will allow third parties to buy ads inside of first-party apps, including Maps. It feels a little bit icky, but that's the report. And in more hardware news, the Apple Watch is expected to go pro with an upcoming sort of sports-focused model, which I imagine would mean like more endurance features, so probably can last longer and things like that.
Rumors, not news.
All rumors.
The powered model will be available in
And probably the one that affects most of us in this room, if we're planning to ship any updates for iOS or iPadOS over the next few months, is that iPadOS 16 will likely launch later than iOS 16 will. And that probably pushes it back in line with the launch of the macOS update, which is often delayed when you compare it to the iOS update anyway. So that's all I've got for the month that was. I'll now hand over to Amy.
Okay, so we're all in agreement. We're dropping support for iOS 15, going straight for iOS 16.
Set your framework.
It's Indian, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy. For those that do not know me, I am from Melbourne, but I do love to travel. So I'm up here in Sydney for this month. Today, tomorrow, usual things. Okay. This year, Apple they decided to give us some goodies with SwiftUI. one of which is to allow us a nicer way, a clean way of handling navigation between different parts of the app. So what I hope to explain today is just how that looks for me. Sort of, there's a lot of really good dub videos out there about it, but try and sort of go beyond what they've presented and start to look at the different ways in which it can fit together. Not sure how long this talk will go for, so if there's an appetite afterwards, might just switch across to Xcode and step through some of the code there if anyone has questions around it. So everyone, when you create an app, you tend to have a set of requirements, a set of criteria that the app needs to achieve, needs to do in order to function and be a good citizen. With regard to navigation, it ends up being boiling down to most of these. Others might add things in, but for me, these are the definite must-haves when you're considering navigation within an app. You've got split view if you're doing anything on the Mac. You've got push and pop navigation on more iOS style apps. You've got sheet presentation, so that's your modals and your alerts. You've got state restoration, because if you accidentally close a window, when you open it back up, you want it to appear in that same spot. And then you've got things like deep linking, which is a general term I'm using here for stuff like, what are the other ways that people will do things that then throw across to your app and you need to handle? Now, betas being betas, the navigation types went through a lot of pain. Anyone trying them in beta 1 felt a lot of the rough edges, but now they've come good. They've actually shown us what is available. So let's take a look at some code around the split view. Sadly, don't have many graphics in this, which will hopefully make a bit more sense when we jump across to Xcode and start to see all of this. But for a Mac OS app and also for an iPad OS app, you've got this idea of there being a split between different sort of panes in the app window. It can be either 2 or 3. The leftmost one tends to be your sidebar, has a selection of different items there which you can navigate between. You then have the, if you're doing a 3-panel layout, you've then got what is your content. That sort of sits in the second one. And then the details, which is your more fine-grained stuff as you get in. So that's the general layout. How to construct this in code is you use the navigation split view type. The first bit there is for your sidebar, then you've got the content and the details being constructed, which is pretty cool. If you're going for something that is more of a stack, then you will use the navigation stack. So here, what it's doing is it's just setting out a list of items with some links in there. When the links are interacted with, it'll look for an appropriate destination to present. Now, these destinations are things that sort of say, okay, where is it that needs to go? You've got the navigation destination helper there, not helper, modifier function there, which will tell the view how to handle this particular destination. One thing to remember with the structure of these is your navigation stack is the outside. And then you put your navigation destination on your list or something else. You don't want to bury the destination right down inside. It causes problems. You want to have it as at the highest level of the stuff that it is replacing and going further into the navigation. Now, jumping back to our split view, one of the really good things about the types and the approach that Apple has given us is when these types exist on macOS, iOS, iPadOS, and they will allow you to, if you set up a split view, it will automatically collapse down into a stack when it's being presented on an iOS device, when the device has a compact width. So for iOS, you open the app, the first view that you get there is your content view that will get displayed. You then have a back button which will take you back to your sidebar. If you interact with anything in the content and you need to jump across, and it changes the binding in for the details view, it acts like a push. So it'll get pushed onto the navigation stack there, which is pretty cool. Okay. Sheets, again, fairly straightforward, fairly standard. It's a well-known pattern where you're providing an item to sort of present on top of everything in a modal way. Here, we're just using the same style of the details link again in order to define the content of the sheet in the same way that it would have in the navigation stack. Really, so having images is probably going to be good here. So I'm just going to jump across to Xcode, okay, and start showing a bit of this. Let's build and run. Nice small app. Okay. Oh, here we have our standard 3-pane layout. The sidebar there, the content, empty area is the details. You then select one of the items, it'll show up in the detail, and you can interact with it there to demonstrate some of the navigation stack behavior, going from one item in the detail through. This is how the navigation stack ends up working. We'll stop that and we'll grab an iPhone device. This will need to launch the simulator, which again is a pretty slow thing, as well as build again, because it needs all of your iOS frameworks.
Does the content part of that 3-panel one, does that have a toolbar as well? Was it only have a toolbar on the detail?
You'll see in a second.
Okay.
But as, so not sure if that comment came through on the audio. The question was, does it have a toolbar, navigation bar, stuff like that when on the iPhone? Yes, it does. And as mentioned before, you've got the back there. This is switching between all of your sort of your initial sidebar, then your content here, and then what would be a push through. The detail is again a push. One of the things I don't enjoy about the simulator is by default it goes, oh, you're American, you get freedom units. Yeah, so very little effort. It will, yeah, so all of this here, this is just what is doing the changing between your 3-panel on Mac OS through to your iPhone, which presented the content at the start and had all of your stack navigation in it. Pretty cool. Yep. So how that sort of ends up updating is all of these bindings here, when they change, because in this case, our router is a state object, SwiftUI just magically knows, hey, there's a change to this property in the state object, go ahead and reevaluate bits of your view. So for this, it will go, okay, did content change? No, but detail changed. Since it did, let's push something onto the stack or present it as need be, which is all pretty cool that you get all of that pretty much for free. And away you go. Again, sheets, the same detail view, similar sort of type used to show in the binding, just gets set there, which is cool. The fun thing happens with your state restoration in that, okay, you've got this bit which you want to persist and then retrieve based on your window being dismissed, created. Same on iOS, if you need to, if you kill the app and then launch it again, there should be a restoration of the state because that's good app behavior. This particular struct is what I've created to hold that information so it can then be persisted. Sidebar selection defines the information that goes into the content. Detail selection goes through to your details link. They very much get created from these bindings here, sidebar, details. I probably should update the naming there. It's not quite the clearest, but you get the general picture. There's the relation between those. So when you look to restore this state, it will make the appropriate selections and show everything. So one of the fun things I've been dealing with is you've got all of these types that you can use within the app while it's in memory and get away with. But what happens then if you want to persist it to a JSON file or something like that? Creating a valid representation of this is not the easiest. So with JSON being sort of a key value type structure, you want to define your types and give them an encodable representation that makes sense, and you can persist it and then restore it. Here, these are all of your different detail links and just a bit of the code where it's going, okay, for a particular ride that is being shown. That ride has an identifier. In the majority of cases, this is going to be an NS managed object ID because I'm dealing with core data. That can be represented by URI. Get that and persist it. Otherwise, I'm sort of going, okay, most likely that identifier could be a path or something. Haven't built that out just yet, but you get the idea that you need to be able to identify where it is. Sorry. Again, then for the statistics, they are related to a date. Anything with date formatting is just painful. I'll get to today's nightmare shortly, in that getting the date into a good representation is fraught with a lot of errors, because even when you're using the ISO 8601, I think it is, format, there are a lot of variations around it, and you want to make sure that you persist and retain enough data in there. Yeah, you're deliberately not going to be able to read that. This is part of the constructor, the init function, where it's taking in a string value and going, okay, create this type for me. Yeah, Regex is it's a fun thing, and thankfully we got some nice tools to make it less painful. So we don't have to worry about this complex string there. We can actually make use of some types, result builders, stuff like that to get a valid regex to use. One of the nice things we can get is a choice of. So here we're just looking for that first part of the string, ride or some variant of statistics. And we can use the choice of type to create a list of things, and it will generate the regex of, can be this or this or this or this or this, which is quite nice. Our second choice list becomes a little bit more complex. Here, I really don't like the use of the requirement of the use of one here. One should be inferred by its existence in our list of choice of. Here, they're all strings, so we can get away with it. Here, we need to do a little bit of type erasure. So it can either be an ISO 8601 with time zone, including fractional seconds, or it can be a URL. And the regex that gets constructed will allow for a selection of either of these. The pattern itself for the regex, we're going to capture that first choice, so ride or some variant of stats. We're then going to maybe have some white space in there, and then maybe we will capture a value from that second bit. Yeah, so using the result builder with regex, called a Regex Builder, this is how we can construct it. It's a lot nicer to have it formatted like this instead of needing to try and explain a string or even remember it, what it does 30 seconds after writing it. Passing it then goes, okay, here's our input being the value, give us a first match of this particular pattern. which it does. We then look at the output, which will be a tuple of some length of all of our values. So here, our two capture lists, first choice, second choice, map here to our result. The first part of it I'm omitting because that's the match of everything. The first match is our sort of ride or stats, which we want. And then we've got our second match, which is from the from that second list, which is here either the ISO 8601 with time zone or our URL. Now we get into some pretty nasty code in that we've identified what it is at the start. We're using pattern matching for our case there. And we're going, okay, we want to match this, but we also know that it requires a second bit. So let's match that as well. Then we need to unwrap that optional value. Because it's a substring, we need to create a real string from it. Yay, fun. And then we get the URL from it. End result, we have an appropriate type saying, here's the ride, here's an identifier. Where it gets a little bit trickier is with the stats, because we need to get a date from it. Same approach, move it from being optional, get the string from the substring, then get the date. Would be nice if it actually identified it was a date straight up. Might need to play around with it to identify this, but using the same formatter which assists it, we then use that to extract it. A lot of the annoying things around this is trying to get regex to match an ISO formatted date. There are a few different helpers there. If we look back here, there's ISO 8601 with a couple of different variants. ISO 8601 with time zone, with and without time, a whole heap of other things. In my use case, because I went, okay, needs time zone and needs fractional seconds, this is the version that I picked. Took a long time to get that and lots of yelling. Eventually we got there. That then means, so we've got your creating a raw value from it and then being able to create the item itself, the type itself from a string. They're all done. Now you've got the codable conformance, so your decoder here, single value container, because you're just dealing with a string at this level. Yep. You see if you can create it. If you can't, then it's a type mismatch. So you throw up an error. If it exists, then assign to self. For the encoding, it's straightforward in that, again, single value container, and you provide it with your raw value. Yay, win. Notifications on the watch, fun times. Again, state restoration. So we've got our way of persisting it by JSON. How do you then tell your app to make use of it? In macOS, you're going to look for stuff like on appear, on disappear, because you don't have your idea of scenes and your scene phase as you do on iOS. User activity, stuff like your deep links, your push notifications, your spotlight searching, and a whole heap of other stuff need to be looked at. Changing the scenes and your scene phase on iOS is how you would identify, do you want to be persisting this? Do you want to be restoring it? All of that is pretty good. Yep, deep linking, similar approach in that for a deep link, you will be given a URL, URI, and you want to be able to deconstruct that and get all of the information. So you'll probably have your different path components. First might be your content, second might be your details, and just being able to pass that correctly. Once you do, you throw it into whatever is handling your bindings and your state and go, here are your new values. Yeah, then magically goes, yay, I'll present myself. It's awesome, it's state driven, it's really, really good. Cool. That is all I had slide-wise. Might do questions and open up Xcode and potentially a few more deep dives if it makes sense. Any questions?
What does that say?
Yep.
What does that say?
What does it say? Arigato gozaimasu, which is thank you. Yep.
You mentioned that in stack navigation, the destination shouldn't be hidden too deep. What happens if we do that? What issues does it cause? Because you mentioned that it can cause issues.
Sorry. The destination shouldn't.
You mentioned when you talked about the navigation stack.
Yep.
So not the split view, but the navigation stack. That it should be at the highest level.
Oh, yes, yes. So, yep, I'll just collapse it like that. So you sort of see it here on the list itself, which is your top level view within your stack there. If for some reason you were doing something like this, where you're trying to put the destination onto a navigation link, what this will do is it will create code that will try and handle all of that destination for each of the items there. So it's going to get horribly confused as to what it should do. When you put it at the top level within the navigation stack, which I believe is what Apple's docs themselves advise, you're going to have your the best behavior, best experience. What was that?
So you had the example of the navigation split view, and that first sort of parameter was for the sidebar content. I noticed that on iOS, or like on a small size class, it rendered as a list. If you had 4 or fewer items, would it render as a tab bar, or do you need to handle that?
No. Tab bars are something completely different to your stack and your split view. Different paradigms completely. Right. So if you're using a tab, you would have navigation stacks appropriately within them. A tab as a container for a split view, no, doesn't make sense.
Okay, all right.
That's the same as you like here. People have done it, but they actually say, don't do this.
Yeah.
Like line 1.
Yep. No.
We've got a question from the live chat from Stuart, and he asks, can you convert the Regex Builder into raw Regex?
Can you convert the Regex Builder into raw Regex?
You can get it the way around. Yeah.
Let's see. let's see if Xcode decides to be happy. And let's try and cheat on Xcode. So you see, like, after every one of the unit tests with a breakpoint in there, Xcode has just been going, no, can't function. And I have to trash derived data and a whole heap of other things. Okay. Yeah.
Little previews.
Okay.
Shortcut for that one.
So Regex here. I can sell a DB. Can we get anything? No. I'm really just plugging away here, seeing if there's anything that makes sense. No.
If you're gonna do dump pattern, regex, maybe it's gonna.
And that would evaluate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, dump, yeah, pattern.
Anything resembling, like, the closest representation you've got is probably this. And then it goes to a DSL tree. I would actually be a bit scared to look at this. The people that write Swift and do all of this, they know stuff a lot better than me. They're pretty awesome, and they would probably know how it all gets optimized into a nice bit of regex. Yeah, I would just be like, oh dear. I'll go back to the result, to the Regex Builder. Thank you very much. Hope that answers the question there, Stu.
UI question. Could you run it on simulator and IIS? I think when you do transition, the window title would seem disconnected from the view and appearing like separately.
So, as in like this, where it's actually
When you go
showing
to, like,
it.
details, like another view.
Yep.
I'll go deeper into.
Oh, do some stats. Yep.
Yeah, so when you showed stats, so monthly stats on previous screen, they go back and now again. Monthly stats.
Where's that slow animations?
Yeah, there you go.
Don't let anyone at Apple see this one.
So yeah, what's with the window title? Like, it's doesn't seem to be part of it.
You mean navigation bar and navigation bar title? Do you want to file a radar about that, or should I? Sorry, Apple people are nice and friendly. I hadn't picked up on that one, so thank you for picking up on it. Anyone that understands it a bit more, please file radars so friendly Apple people can look at it and fix it. Yeah, I may or may not remember or have time to look at it, but yeah, that is unfortunately there.
Another round of applause for Amy. Thanks, everyone. Cool. Well, that's the end of the formal proceedings for the evening. Thank you to everyone for coming. Feel free to hang around and have a chat. I think there's a little bit more pizza left. And don't forget about the Apple gear that we've got for the option there. So have a good night, get home safely, and we'll catch you all next month.